Welcome to another episode of Conversation and Cocktails with your host, me, Lenny B. In this episode, we speak to musician Danny Lilker. Danny has played in such bands as SOD, Nuclear Assault, Anthrax, just to name a few. We sat down, had a few drinks, had a great conversation. Danny's a great guy, and we went for it. So, roll that fucking footage. How you doing, Dan?
All right, how you doing?
Good. My first question is, do you own any t-shirts with sleeves on them?
Actually, I do, and I've worn them recently because we've had a real frigid spell up in Rochester, New York, and I went as long as I could without wearing shirts with sleeves, but finally I just had to say fuck it when it was like 4 degrees out, and I wore my Converge shirt when Brutal Truth and Converge had toured in Japan in 2009, and they gave me a shirt and it was so cool, and I said, a couple of shirts I just saved just in case it gets that cold.
Yeah.
And I busted it out, and it confused everybody at work. I work at the record archive, and they were like, "You're wearing sleeves, dude." They were like taking pictures of me and sending it to people. Like,
It was a big day on social media.
I guess so. And I was just
Lilker, sleeves, hashtag.
yeah, and but that's only because we've been dealing with some single digits up there.
Yeah. It's been fucking brutal out lately.
Yeah.
What happens to the sleeves?
Well, I don't make stupid headbands out of them.
Oh, no sleeve hats?
No. Billy Milano had this theory once. He figured that I actually have a whole drawer full of just the sleeves I cut off, like I would save them all. You can also make little cat shirts out of them, but it's hard to get it over the cat's head and paws without them struggling. Because then they just have this cool kind of just like black bands on their torso.
And cats usually don't like that type of shit. It turns into a Band-Aid moment.
Well, I did have this Uniform Choice shirt a long time ago, and the sleeve said, "I don't need your drugs." So I tried putting that on my cat to see if he would be straight edge, but he wasn't going for it. No, it said something like, and besides, me and John Connolly used to have a joke about that shirt that would say, like, you know, if one guy had decent weed, the other guy had better weed, you would go, "I don't need your drugs, I need his."
That's good. Growing up in Bayside, right? I mean, Bayside is an interesting, it's almost like suburban, but yet urban at the same time, because it's a lot of single and double family homes, not a lot of apartment buildings out there. I mean, growing up in that neck of the woods, I mean, what was your experience of just like, you know, record stores, and was there anything out there?
I actually had to go up to Union Turnpike and Utopia. I'm not even sure what the hell. See, I haven't lived in New York City for so long. But I went to the Music Box. I'm trying to think if that would still be considered Flushing or if it was too far south.
That might actually have been on the border of Nassau.
Well, no, because it was Utopia Park.
Oh,
right?
Utopia.
Yeah, if you went out, if you kept taking Union Turnpike east, then you'd end up out there. Of course, then there was Slip Disc and Valley Stream. In Bayside, there was a store, the name escapes me, but it wasn't really an underground store. They might have had a couple of metal records, but there was a store called the Music Box, the one I was talking about.
Yeah.
The one I took Dave Mustaine to when he was still in Metallica. And that's where I got my Sodom records and stuff like that back in the day. But Bayside itself, oh sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you were saying Bayside itself.
Bayside itself, yeah, it did have that kind of, it was a couple of neighborhoods over from Nassau County. After that, you had Douglaston and Little Neck, then you had Great Neck, and then you had the islands and everything like that. But it was close enough to the city, especially if you took the LIRR, 26-minute train ride, and you were at Penn Station. So it was kind of a mix like that. You were close enough to the city to stay in touch with all that stuff. But it was quiet enough that you could get away from the city.
Yeah, back when they had double fare zones. You know, that was always a trip. I mean, I've been out to like places like Whitestone, you know, further out in Whitestone, and Flushing, further out in Flushing, where it's just like, all right, now I have to take the bus. And that's when you're like, holy shit, where am I? You know, I've always thought of New York when, like, when you get to the end of the line, it's like, oh shit, this is still part of New York City.
Right.
You know, and Bayside's one of those. Whitestone is definitely one of those. College Point is another place.
Oh yeah, College Point's strange because it's the way it's geographically located. There's nothing after it. It's just like the end of that particular road there. So.
Well, yeah, it's like a couple of. It's a lot of industrial with a handful of residential, like thrown in there. Like some like poor sucker bought a fucking place in College Point. You know, it's just like, I wanted to live next to this factory and this factory.
It's cheap.
Well, that's too. Well, not anymore.
Right.
Not anymore. New York is becoming extremely expensive nowadays.
Oh, I know. Look what happened to Williamsburg. Jesus.
Oh, I mean, you used to be able to get a railroad apartment down there for $500 a month, and that was only maybe like 20 years ago.
Yeah, now it's insane.
You know, now for the same railroad goes for about $3,500 to $4,000 a month.
Yep, and then you gotta get a slice of goat cheese pizza for $8.
Fuck that.
No.
No, there's so many other good pizza places than fucking goat cheese fucking pizza.
No, yeah, I refuse. I mean, Greenpoint will be like that soon, and
Yeah. Oh, Brooklyn's done.
yeah,
Brooklyn's done. It's been done.
and they're gonna do Long Island City. I saw the interview you did with Mr. Drescher, and you know.
Oh, Long Island City is a fucking mess. I mean, I never thought in my entire life that my mother grew up in Long Island City, so her mother, my grandmother, lived over there. So you know, you would drive through it. There'd be a couple of 5-story tenements, and you know, intermixed with garages, taxi stands, and a couple of Con Ed substations, and it's turned into like a glass menagerie of fucking buildings, and you know, and I build these things, and I almost am like, I'm conflicted because at one point it's like, well, it's my job, but at the same point it's like we're destroying so much of old New York. But New York is never, look what happened to CB's. That's ever since that club went and gone, and that there's a whole different story to that. But we've had a lot of fly-by-night clubs since then in New York, and it sucks. New York is a never-changing thing. It's a never-changing entity, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I remember just good old Lemoore.
Well, Lemoore closed, opened. They, once they the first time they closed it, and they put the stage on the other side of the room.
Yeah, but that was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, no, and then they cut the club in half and made it like half the size, and the other side was a strip club, I think.
I remember that much.
And then they switched it again, and they put the stage in the original spot, but it was like a foot off the ground, and the sound system was fucking terrible.
I think I had already moved out by then. I don't remember that stage.
Yeah, they've moved the stage back and forth from one side of the building to the other at least a half a dozen times since then, trying to recapture that glory. And I mean, I've only gone to Lemoore's, maybe twice, and one was the last show that went to the last Thrash Bash, which I think John Joseph kneed me in the face during the Cro-Mag set, and saw stars. It was like, I was like, ow, what a dick, and it's like, but whatever. And did you guys play that show?
No.
No, it was Leeway. I think Typo played. Maybe they played under the Repulsion name.
What year is this?
90. Well, I'm gonna get flamed for this, but it was either 91 or 92. When no, it was. I think it was 91.
91 was near the end of my time with Nuclear Assault. I'd already been into like grindcore and death metal. Brutal Truth had formed the year before, and thrash was just boring me then. I did stick around until 92, but then by then Brutal Truth had been offered the Campaign for Musical Destruction tour, where we went out for 2 months supporting Napalm Death, Carcass, and Cathedral. So I had to make them. Sure, you'll ask this eventually. What happened? Why'd you leave Nuclear Assault? So now we're doing that. But that goes with the time, so I was not around for the last Thrash Bash. Although the band was still around then. That was by the time we'd done the Out of Order record, which was kind of out of order. And we weren't getting along anymore. There was tension. Part of it was my fault because I just wasn't interested anymore. I'd had my thing with thrash, and it was just boring me.
You needed to move on musically?
Yeah, I was making the bass too distorted for what thrash metal should be because I wanted it to sound like Napalm Death, and that's not what Nuclear Assault should have sounded like. My background vocals sounded more like because that's what I wanted to do, but it shouldn't have. I shouldn't have done that in that band, which is why I said, "Fuck it, I'm going to form a grindcore band and just go all out and do it." So, I'm really digressing here, but hey.
No, it's fine. It's all over the place. That's fine. I actually remember seeing you guys play at that Palladium show, the AF Riot show, and it was 1992, and that was when Connolly was actually just singing, and you had 2 guitar players.
Oh yeah, see that was the Spinal Tap era.
Yeah, and I was like, the first thing I said is like, why is John running around with a fucking mic and not a guitar? And he seemed so awkward.
And we had that guy from TT Quick on guitar.
Was that where he was from?
Dave DiPietro, yeah, it's Glenn's old band. And then that guy Dave would do this big heroic guitar solo. When I mean guitar solo, I mean just a guitar solo with no music in the background. And he'd be doing all this shredding and everything, and me and John would be kind of on our haunches on the side of the stage, and I remember saying to John, "Is this what we're really about, man?" And he could tell that, my enthusiasm had dwindled because it was kind of like the band was going in one direction and I was going in the opposite one. The band was becoming more, like guitar solos, and I just thought that was wanky.
Mm. Howie Abrams, when I spoke to him on this thing, he said that you guys were kind of the guys responsible for getting him into the music business because I guess it was the first record you guys came out with Nuke was on Combat?
Game Over, yes.
Yes. And he went to a meeting, and I guess he had opened his mouth. And
he probably drove us there.
Well, I think that's what it was. And you guys were like, "Oh, come to the meeting," and it sort of like impressed them at Combat to the point where he eventually got his, he got offered a job when he was way too young to get a job there, and a couple of years later, he wound up working at Relatively, which turned into him running In Effect and everything like that. And what did Howie say at that meeting that was like so impressive? I mean, did he just like talk his mind? I mean, we all know Howie. Howie will just is like Howie be like, no, this, and he makes no bones of fucking about it.
I don't remember exactly what he said, but what I can imagine is that the guys at Combat wanted to tap into somebody. But I think they realized by whatever he said that he was like on the ground floor with everything and knew what was going on, and I just think they saw him and just said, this guy should work for us because he's like, he's got his finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Well, at base level, Howie has always been a fan. He has a passion for, whatever it is that underground music, was at that fucking time. And, I mean, he still does. I mean, even though he doesn't work in the music business anymore and whatever, he still has his finger on the pulse, I guess you could say. God bless him,
No, Howie's awesome, and if we were any way responsible for helping him do that, then that's great.
And while we're talking about the record industry, how do you feel that it is now today? Is it like dead to a degree?
Well, it's certainly had to adapt because all the stuff with file sharing, not just file sharing, but also the whole thing where the recording technology has evolved to the point where people are using Pro Tools and they're doing records at home, and it used to be, I was telling my friend Steve Hughes about this, my Australian buddy, that the good thing about the old days was with the record labels, there's quality control because not every band could get their shit put out there, and it's not like all these labels really cared about the music that much. They just saw something that was original and could sell records. So they would be more selective and go, we're not going to sign this band. There already is an Exodus, or something like that. Where it's getting to the point now where anybody's releasing anything because they don't need $40,000 or
No.
whatever the hell to do a record, and they could promote it themselves on with Facebook and all this stuff. So yeah, a lot of that stuff has really gone down. But the labels are what they're trying to do is evolve with it, and oh yeah, iTunes, you can buy this song for 99 cents. So what's happened is people used to make 45-minute records, and they used to have side A and side B, so it had peaks and valleys.
Of course.
You had to have a fast song starting side A, you had to have another fast song starting side B, because somebody flipped over the record or turned the tape around. So,
Well, records were a journey. That's how I always looked at it. Records were a journey. You start off with that heavy fucking track, or like for me, my number one record of all time, and some people go really, is Quadrophenia.
That's a
And
great record.
it's a fantastic record. It's my number one, and it tells a great story. And it starts off with the real me, and and it goes, comes down, fucking shoots back up, comes down a little bit more, and by the end you're just like, love reign over me, and like, fuck, man, what the fuck? And I think some people miss the point on that nowadays.
well, Dark Side of the Moon, 2112,
Oh, fuck yeah.
all records that we all love dearly.
Yes, we cherish those records.
And yeah, and those records had an ebb and flow, and you used to plan out a record. And now, getting back to this, where it's the whole 99 cents for one song on iTunes, in a way it's almost liberating, because if you just want to write 4 songs and you go, that's all I got in me, you could take that, and it used to be an EP, but it doesn't matter. But I was talking about this with my friend Morgan, who plays in the Swedish black metal band Marduk, and he was going, I still like making a record. I still like writing 45 minutes of music, and I'm not just going to take 2 songs and just put them out. Of course, there were singles and EPs. There was that version of stuff, but yeah, labels. Getting back to your original question,
Yes.
it's definitely taken a beating because of the combination of file sharing and recording technology.
Do you think that the label should have jumped on the internet from day one instead of fighting it? Because a lot of them did fight it, and
Well, bands. I mean, look at the shit that Lars was doing. Coming down on.
yeah.
Yeah. I think they were just a little overwhelmed by the technology, and I think they saw it as something negative and adversarial, where maybe they should have been like, well, this is interesting, and how can we take this and work with it, not against it? But people are stuck in their ways. It's like telling some 65-year-old dude, stop drinking vodka and switch to whiskey. He'll be like, fuck you.
Oh, like they tried with Lenny.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, it's certainly not the same. It used to be that, labels were king and you wanted to get signed, and that was a real big, like the bands I was in, that was a big plateau. You get signed, the next one was going to Europe, and,
Yeah.
there were certain goals that you reached and that you tried to, accomplish. And there still are those goals, but they're different now.
Well, speaking of Lars, when you first met those guys, did you ever think they were going to become that fucking thing they are today?
Oh, hell no. When I met those guys, they were like having dinner in a toaster oven. We would take them shopping and, they'd pool their resources and try not to spend too much on beer and weed. And yeah, I mean, I saw them grow. And then, I'll be honest, after Master of Puppets, I mean, everyone says that Injustice for All has some good riffs, but there's no fucking bass on that record. There's literally
No,
bass.
it's all mid-rangey. It's all that bass doesn't exist.
There's actually no bass guitar on it. I think Lars was like, just out of some weird spite, like, because Jason was the new dude, I think they just hit the mute button and just left it like that. So I can't.
Well, I always heard, there was a couple stories I've always heard. Besides that story, I heard jet lag and cocaine. Because they were on that Monsters of Rock tour with Van Halen, Scorpions, and Dokken and Kingdom Come. Remember them?
Oh God, just Led Zeppelin.
Yeah, exactly. They were a bad Led Zeppelin ripoff. and they were flying in between gigs to mix that record, and
You can't do that. You have to focus.
yeah, it's like, dude, you can't fucking spend a few hours in a studio and do that. I mean, nowadays, especially with Pro Tools, you know, everything I've recorded as of late, me personally, the engineer is usually somebody I know personally, and I say, you know what I want it to sound like? Send me some fucking files back, and I will tell you what needs to be done. So I don't have to sit there, because you got to mixing records sometimes like watching fucking paint dry. You know, like, oh, I'm gonna add this compressor. I'm gonna add, you know, this, that, and then you're just like, how many fucking times is he gonna use a patch bay?
I know. I'm impatient too. I'm just like, it sounds fine. What the fuck's wrong with it? Why would you wanna? Yeah.
Oh, well, we have to squeeze. We're gonna put this fucking analog thing, and then we're gonna patch it to this. And
And then when Triggers came out, we have 500 different kick drum sounds we're gonna audition.
why?
Yeah.
Yeah, why? It's like you can't get it fucking on the reel on the first. Then what the fuck's the point?
And that other thing you were talking about, that thing that comes from South America, you can't mix on that. You're like, wait a minute, let me try some flange. Putting some flange sound cool on that? No. Now you're just suggesting shit for the hell of it instead of mixing a record.
Well, that's also why those guys get paid by the hour.
Yeah.
You know, they're like, hey, let's try this. It's like, oh, I see the budget going fucking away real quickly.
Yeah.
You know? Getting back to some of your earlier musical history, I mean, when you started playing, because you originally were a guitar player, and you still play guitar, obviously, but I mean, as of now, when you write riffs or you're jamming, do you go to the guitar first, or do you kind of play on the bass, or what's your process?
I do write a lot of stuff on guitar, but that's mostly because then I could show it to the other dudes.
All right.
In last August, my black metal band broke up. There was a band called Nocturnal Hellstorm that we were together for 7 years in Rochester, New York. And our drummer, Joe, was an amazing guitarist. I played guitar, our keyboard player. Now, when I say keyboards, I don't mean some ballroom dancing shit. It was just choirs that just gave it that really eerie feel. He was an amazing guitarist. So and we had 2 guitarists in the band, so there were 5 dudes out of 6 dudes in the band who could play guitar.
Oh.
So there were riffs flying around everywhere. Of course, it made it hard to rehearse with 6 dudes in the band. I'm working Thursday night. Oh, goddamn.
Well, yeah, it's kind of.
But
I have 4 guys in my band, and it's, you know, guys are older with kids and everything else, and it's like, can you make it at 12 o'clock, you know, on fucking Saturday? You know?
PM?
AM. I mean, no, PM.
Yeah,
PM,
yeah,
right,
it's like-
noon.
No, I'm not gonna play metal at 12 o'clock unless I'm, the first band on at the Maryland Death Fest or something. But as far as writing,
Yeah.
well, I'm making that joke because my band Blurring is playing Maryland Death Fest in May, and I think we're going on at like 1:10 in the afternoon. And we're like, all right, well, we can fucking drink all day after that, and we will be drinking before that anyway. But
It's got to be 5 o'clock somewhere.
yeah, I played guitar in the very beginning of Anthrax only because I was the only one who could figure out all those like fucking Iron Maiden and Judas Priest harmonies that when we were a cover band. And I switched back to bass because that's what I really wanted to play. And also, me and Scott Ian went to see Black Sabbath, and we were right in front of Geezer and watching him. And Scott was like, "Dude, you should switch back to bass, man. Look at him. That's what you really should be doing." I said, "Fine, man."
Was Neil really that much of a dick?
Well, Neil just had his issues, which made him a dick.
You guys went to high school with him.
Yeah.
I mean,
Can you imagine being an insecure perfectionist? The conflicts that would go on. Can I borrow your ashtray, Rick?
yes, you can.
Neil was just very uptight, had no sense of humor, and we were obnoxious teenagers. So if you saw somebody with no sense of humor, you would just ride him harder because it was fun.
Oh, of course.
So
You want to see the motherfucker explode.
yeah, and
You know.
Neil had an idea of what professional meant that was different than the rest of us. So he didn't like the fact that I smoked weed, and it wasn't like I was non-functional. I was still I wrote most of Fistful of Metal. It wasn't like I wasn't showing up for rehearsal and staying home and sleeping all day. But he just took a disliking to me, and he told the rest of the guys, it's him or me, and I don't like that dude, and they decided to hold on to him because he was the front man, and he was the familiar face. But they realized their error because they threw him out 6 months after that.
Yeah.
And then 6 months after that, I got a call from Scott, do you want to play in this little hardcore band with me? Which turned into S&D.
Yeah. I mean, I always look at, and that fucking, you know, I like the first Anthrax record, but at the same time, I'm like, it's Anthrax, but it's not, because what they turned into, you know, with Belladonna, and, you know, they became a different, to me, they became a different monster from that era.
Sure.
You know, to the Belladonna era, and then, you know, there was what I like to call the lean years with John Bush. You know, and, I'm a fan, but at the same time, let's get real. They were not packing in the rooms like they were, and it was a different album, but metal was taking a hit back then.
Yeah.
Depending on what side of the fence you were on, and even Metallica saw some of those lean fucking years with their fucking, bullshit and their,
The 90s were a difficult time because you had grunge and new metal, and the Chili Peppers were big, and everybody was all of a sudden trying to pop on the bass and everything like that. But the thing is, the 90s was a beautiful time for black and death metal. It was still churning underneath for those who cared. And it was a tough time to be into metal because you'd be at the airport, at the bar, about to go play somewhere, and they'd be like, oh, you play metal? Is that like Korn and Limp Bizkit? And you would just grit your teeth and just, no, it's not, but you're not going to fucking punch some dude in the head at the bar. So, we just did what we did and ignored the trends. And
well, that's what you have to play it because you love to fucking play it. I mean,
yeah.
at the end of the day, like when the Korn thing came out, and it was like, all right, I get it, big open like riffs with 7-string guitars.
It's going through dual rectifiers, so you could just drop the guitar to the floor and it would sound heavy.
Yeah, you just had to go straight direct, and there you go. Add a bunch of fucking effects, whatever it was. Limp Bizkit was kind of corny.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, very fucking corny.
I had a problem with the sociological issues of it too, which was a bunch of white middle class dudes trying to act like homeboys. That was just stupid. They didn't live that fucking thing. They didn't know.
That was a whole fucking notion that they thought that they could fucking come up with and be like, hey, we're urban. It's like, motherfucker, you're from Florida. You're from fucking wherever, Tallahassee. Get the fuck out of here. What do you know? Except cul-de-sacs,
right?
And fucking street hockey,
right? You never had any fucking. You never had to worry about anything, and
I have to ask you, what kind of student was Craig Satari?
Well, we'll go back to how I met Craig, because I was friends with his older brother, Scott. Mm-hmm. Scott and I were in the same grade, and I met him in high school, and we both played in orchestra together. We both played the big bass. But Scott didn't really have much musical talent. That was kind of funny. He just, the fuck was that? Wow. See, modern technology, man. Just some weird fucking cylindrical thing just made a noise.
I know. Fucking nuts.
So, I played with, I didn't play with him. I played in the same orchestra class as Craig's older brother, Scott. And then we got to be friends, and I would go over his house. He didn't live too far from me. And he had his little brother, Craig. Just a little scrawny kid. And back then, we were listening to like Priest and Maiden and Sabbath and stuff like that. This is like almost pre-thrash metal. This is like when Motorhead was radical and everything.
Oh, so about 1980, 81?
Yeah. And, because I graduated junior high school in 79, so yeah, we're talking 80, 81. And when Scott and I would sit around and we were like, I don't know, 15, 16 years old, sitting there listening to Iron Maiden and smoking weed, and Craig was like 11, and he would come in the room, and he was at an age where it's a good age to be, where you could be very, impressionable, and he heard the stuff we were listening to, and then I was trying to give Scott bass lessons. That's what it was. And Scott, God bless him, he just wasn't really picking up on it. You know, some people have the G and some people don't. But Craig was there in the background watching all this, and he started picking up on A, the music, and B, playing the music.
Mm.
So just by virtue of him being Scott's little brother and hanging out when we would hang out and smoke weed and Steve Harris, listen to this fucking dude, and
Oh yeah.
you know, so it reached a point where Craig just had a natural affinity for playing bass. I mean, it's awkward to talk about. I don't want to give myself too much credit, but I was definitely an influence on him because that's when Anthrax was in its embryonic stages, and I went back and forth from guitar to bass depending on who could figure out the harmonies, which was me. But he just started picking up on the stuff I was doing, and next thing you know, I was showing him how to play bass, and he was picking it up. And as far as the students, I never officially gave them bass lessons. I can't teach somebody bass because I don't know theory. I learned it from the heart, you know. When I learned how to, I played piano when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And that's where I learned what an F sharp was compared to a D. So when I started playing guitar before I played bass when I was like 11 or 12, somebody showed me how to do the classic power chord, you know, and then the other ones you could go up and down over here. And power chords, you know, we were thinking, you know, Pete Townsend and shit like that.
Oh yeah.
Back then, you know, or Cream or whatever. But basically, even though I was not the type of person who could teach somebody how to play bass as far as this scale and that scale, he could tell that, you know, I was passionate about it, and he fed off that, and he became very passionate about it. And then I think the first band he would have been in was New York City Mayhem, and obviously they were fucking nuts.
Yeah.
You know, that was, you know, Tommy and Gordon and Craig, and they were just trying to play as fast and chaotic as possible, off the rails, but still somehow tight because Gordon was the tight metal guitarist.
Oh yeah.
But Craig just took that ball and ran with it and forged his own identity, and obviously went on to play in lots of amazing, he's almost like the hardcore version of me because I played in lots of metal bands of different genres, and he did that with hardcore, but there was always that kind of metal side to it as far as the aggression. I don't know, it's one of those things where he's so close to me with that it's almost hard to step back and analyze it. But, and I know Craig gives me lots of props, and you know, it's always sort of, you know, but yeah, I think he was in the right place at the right time when I was doing what I was doing, and he picked up on all that, and he just took it and did his own thing with it. And he's like a son to me in that aspect. You know, I'm very proud of him.
No, and you should be. He has quite the fucking resume.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like he has such an aggressive presence and sound about himself. You know, when he was playing, you know, everything from Mayhem to fucking Agnostic Front, and now to Sick of All. You know, and I mean,
bass tone, you know.
Yeah, oh, his bass tone is disgusting. You know, and not disgusting bad, but like disgusting where it's just like, oh my god, dude, it's just so aggressive sounding. You know?
I like to think I had something to do with that.
I think you probably did. I think you probably did. During the break, me and Dan were talking about sounds and everything else like that, and probably should have rolled tape on that, but fuck you. You ain't fucking privy to that. Speaking of hardcore, you were going to CB's at an early time during hardcore. How were you welcomed or not welcomed into a hardcore matinee setting? Because, you know, there was some scary type people at fucking matinees.
Well, me and Craig went down to see AOD, Bodies in Panic, and Malignant Tumor, January '84. And I do have to give a certain person named Scotty and some props because he got me into Discharge and Agnostic Front. I know that in the hardcore scene, people saw him as like some exploiter and blah blah blah, and I understand some of that. But I will say that he did steer me in the right direction, and then I went for myself to see what it was like. As far as going down there, yeah. Of course, we thought that there was just going to be a bunch of big burly skinheads who were going to kick our asses because we had long hair. But when I went down there, I met people like Billy Psycho, and they were just like fucking, dude, I got the fucking Nuclear Assault demo at Bleecker Bob's. It's fucking killer, dude. You want to go around the corner and burn one and blah blah blah. And it was a bit intimidating at first, but a lot of those people were very welcoming and nice. And even the people who were cynical at first, like R.I.P. Ray B's.
Yeah.
Ray B's was, there was a reason that some of those people were cynical because they did see people I associated with, like somebody I mentioned 1 minute ago, that they saw as people who were possibly just exploiting hardcore to use for their own popularity.
Yeah.
And it took Ray a few months to realize that maybe these kids with the long hair weren't just coming down there just to be like, oh, hardcore is so cool. They realized after a while, especially when me and John Connolly were coming down there,
Yeah.
all the time going to shows, that we genuinely were interested in it and wanted to, and we weren't just there because it was cool, and we weren't going there to be seen or anything like that. And next thing you know, Nuclear Assault was playing shows with, the Crumbsuckers and all these bands like that. But yeah, at the beginning, most of those dudes were fucking super cool. And even the dudes who weren't super cool at the beginning, who were cynical for, like I said, maybe good reasons, came around and saw that when we were going to shows there, because we were genuinely interested in the scene, and we're there every Sunday, not just when some metallic band was playing either. And yeah, that was a great time. I'd go to Lemoore and see a bunch of metal bands on Friday night, and then go to CBGB's Sunday Hardcore Matinee. And yeah, I think we were being a bit brave at the beginning, but it never happens where these big burly skinheads beat the fuck out of us because we had long hair. Nah, they were all cool. We thought they'd be all straight edge too because we smoked weed and drank, and oh god, they did. Yeah.
What was your take on when like the straight edge thing started happening? And there was a point between like 86 to 88 where straight edge really like
Blossomed pretty good.
yeah, and everyone was wearing champions and fucking the whole uniform thing.
Revelation.
Yeah, I mean, how did they? When were you going to shows at CB's at that point?
Oh yeah, I mean, I actually roadied for Youth of Today at what the fuck was that club on 17th Street around the corner from the Limelight, but on the side street. I hung out with all those people, and they knew I smoked weed and drank beer, but they also knew I was a dude from the metal scene, and nobody was going to give me any shit. Nobody was going to lecture me. Okay. Not everybody who was pushing all that was entirely genuine all the time, I'm going to say.
Okay.
I'm not going to name any names, but I think a lot of that was just, and especially later, a few years later, it was all about selling your hoodies for $40 because they're fucking impressionable 16-year-old kids were going to... Nah, there was never... I never got judged, personally, because they knew I was the long-haired dude and I was going to be fucking stoned, and they weren't going to fucking try to change that. And there was never that kind of conflict. Nobody ever got in my face and fucking knocked the beer out of my hand. They knew better, not because I was going to beat them up, because I'm pretty passive, but because they knew it would be a waste of time.
Yeah.
You're not going to change that. But obviously it was kind of weird because when that stuff was in full effect, yeah, it was all about being positive, but, I'd still roll up in my Hellhammer shirt and fucking, grab a beer and... I don't know, I mean, some of the positive stuff rubbed off on me a little bit. It would be inspiring, when you're at a show and they were fucking, and like I said, I roadied for you today because I got to drink all their beer, and no, it wasn't that awkward, I mean, I certainly wasn't going to be stop doing what I was doing to impress anybody because I don't give a fuck.
No,
I am who I am, and I'm not going to change for anybody.
No, I've definitely gotten that impression from you. You do what you do, you don't give a fuck.
That's what I've always done.
No, and God bless you for that. Switch gears into SOD. Did you ever think that band was going to be as influential or as popular as it was when you were up in Ithaca recording that stuff?
Oh, hell no. It was just like a fun hardcore band. That was a way for Scott and Charlie to play more aggressive music because the first Anthrax album, which I wrote 90% of, pardon me, was a harder, more aggressive record. And then those guys went in a direction after they threw out Neil, and they came back a little bit with Among the Living with some faster stuff, but with Spreading the Disease, they had kind of slowed down, and Scott wanted to do something more aggressive. He was still hella into Discharge of the Agnostic Front. So I got a call in April '85 from Scott, like, do you want to play in this band we're going to do? It's called The Diseased. And then it turned into Stormtroopers of Death. And I think that was his way of, it was kind of an olive branch.
For getting kicked out of the way it went down?
Yeah. I think those guys realized they'd made a mistake throwing me out, and they should have thrown Neil out. I don't regret that, because I went on to do Nuclear Assault. And to be perfectly honest, Anthrax was not as much of a democracy. It's really Scott and Charlie's band, and, that's the way it worked. So, had I stayed in Anthrax, I don't think it would have been difficult for me to keep doing the pushing for the harder, faster stuff that is what I am. Because obviously when I played grindcore and black metal and shit,
yeah,
now
of course.
I haven't stopped because I can't do anything else well. So, with SOD, we went up there, we did that record at Pyramid Sound in 3 days for a $5,000 budget, which in those days was chump change.
Yeah.
And when I got a little distance from it, we were mixing it, and I'm like, all right, guys, we were talking about this before, mixing is fucking boring. I'm going to go out, get a couple of slices and a beer, and I'll be back in an hour. And I came back, and I went in the control room, and they were mixing Fuck the Middle East, and I went, holy shit, this is fucking heavy. Just being removed from it for 60 minutes, being away from that element and coming back with a fresh perspective on it, I said, fuck, dude, this is, I didn't think we were going to be doing this. This is actually becoming pretty monstrous. And then, me and Scott and Rick Hunold from Exodus, they were in town for some reason. We were in Washington Square Park, and we had the tape. We had the fucking mixed tape, mastered, whatever, and a boombox. And we were in Washington Square Park. Scott didn't smoke weed, but me and Rick smoked a bunch. And we said, do you want to hear this thing we did? Check out this band. And as soon as he heard, da-da, Rick's eyes, which were already very large, fucking got twice as big. And right then, when I saw that expression on his face, I realized that we had created something way beyond what we had intended to do, and it was going to be a fucking monster. And sure enough, right after that, it blew up, and that is why it stopped shortly afterwards, because the other guys in Anthrax got kind of peeved that this little joke band that we did all of a sudden got all this attention. And as far as the lyrics, it was more of a sociological experiment, in my opinion. We saw Maxim Rock and Roll talking shit about New York bands like Agnostic Front.
So they always did that. They had a hard-on for fucking New York. They always did.
So we said, okay, we did the body rate theory. Let's give them something to talk about. And when we called our album Speak English or Die, we knew that we were going to ruffle some feathers and panties in a bunch and all that. But for me, it was more about let's just be as obnoxious as possible. Didn't mean all that stuff. Let's just fucking be as rude and fucked up and just make people go and have that over totally intense music as this package deal. And I think that's what made it magical. And if you ask people like Jimmy from Murphy's Law, he's like, dude, I thought those lyrics were amazing, man. I didn't think you guys were kidding. I love that shit.
When I fucking first heard it, I was like, all right, I got the joke. You know, I was one of those guys that was like, all right, I get this. This is humorous, this is fun, this is fucking what it is. And there were some people that really got fucking pissed about that stuff. You know, like, they're like, oh, fucking racist cocksuckers. And I'm like, wait a minute, time out. All right. You know, you and Scott are obviously Jewish. You know, conservative, which means, all right, we eat the food, whatever. You know. And I was like, get the fuck out of here. You know, like, half the fucking people in the hardcore scene will say some shocking shit just to say some shocking shit. But it's lightheartedness. And I think that was the same thing. It was like, oh, we're gonna fuck around, push people's buttons, and see who fucking likes it and who goes, oh, fuck no. Dear Danny, fuck you. You know?
Well, there were a couple of people like that, but then I'd be like, one of the lines of Speak English or Die is, what's that dot on your head? Do you use it to see?
Yeah.
It's kind of, then we wrote a song about not having milk in the morning when you're hungover.
Yeah.
So you have to look at the whole thing. Sure, there was some button pushing.
Yeah.
And some people deserve to have their buttons pushed. Some people were too uptight and fucking needed, I mean, it's a whole different, okay, there's an analogy with that, with my obsession with black metal and why I play it, because I'm not a Satanist, but when you see those motherfuckers in front of Planned Parenthood with their signs fucking hassling women, I don't care if those people think I'm a devil worshiper, because those people need to get a migraine, because they're fucking assholes. And it's kind of the gray area thing, you know, with that. Is that guy a racist? You know, I'm not a fucking racist, but if you're so dumb that you think that, then go ahead and think it. Because, you know, you're a fucking idiot and you need to fucking, I don't know.
I remember the first time I heard the SOD stuff was on the bumpers for Headbangers Ball.
Oh, right, when they took like 6
Chromatic Death, or, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was just like, and I think that was the first time I really heard it, and I was just like, what the fuck is that? And, you know, someone was like, oh, that's SOD. I'm like, oh, I'm buying this. You know, I was like, holy shit, this is fucking brutal. You know, and it really was. It was like, oh my god, this is fucking, it's short, fast, and sweet.
But it had the metallic.
Yes. It had a little bit of this, a little bit of that, had a little bit of metal, a little bit of hardcore, a little bit of fucking un-PC-ness, which, you know, I think in today's world, you know, like I think we were talking before, like could you make a Blazing Saddles today? Could you make a Kentucky Fried Movie today? You know, I think people would lose their fucking minds if they saw
All in the Family, or, yeah.
Oh, All in the Family would never fly today. You know, people would be like, oh my god, how can you fucking say that stuff? And it's like, you know what? Take it in stride and laugh at yourself. You know, that's how I look at it. It's just like, to me, like I was in a band with 3 Dominican guys and half black, half Korean. And, you know, we would just laugh at stupid shit because it's like, all right, well, you know, all types of races, you know, just making terrible jokes at each other in the van ride to the fucking gig, smoking an ounce of weed a day, you know.
Well, it was Hemlock, the black metal band I was in the 90s. It was a New York black metal band. Had fucking 2 Italian guys, Puerto Rican, and me. So
Yeah.
you had 2 guineas, a spick, and a kike. You know, we could just make fun of each other.
The jokes write themselves at that fucking point.
But that's New York.
Yeah.
And in New York, the Italians and the Jews were the same thing, because their mothers are like, you're not going out without a jacket, you haven't eaten enough. You know, it's...
No, it's true. It's completely true.
Because it was an urban thing, and urban black metal was difficult to play because everybody was like, oh, you should be out in the forest. I'm like, there's no forest in Queens.
No. Forest Park.
Yeah.
And
hills,
you know, you're just
yeah.
going to find fucking junkies and whatever fucking Lemon Forest Bar.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, SOD was just one of those things where the myth just grew. I mean, you guys played a handful of gigs, well, maybe 10 gigs in 85?
Yeah.
Maybe less than that?
Yeah, like 7 or 8.
Yeah, and I went to that 92 gig, and it was the most violent fucking gig I had ever been to. You know, it was just like, you were just punching people to stay alive at that point. You were just like, if I don't punch people, I'm getting punched, you know, and I mean, fucking Morbid Angel did great that night. Fucking Agnostic Front did great that night. You guys fucking just went somewhere else with it, and it was like, holy shit. Because I remember the Village Voice, you know, how we used to find out about gigs was, you know, you went to Bleecker Bob's, got flyers at shows, or you waited for the fucking Village Voice to come out, and with us, it would get delivered to us on Tuesday night. And, you know, for the Wednesday sale.
Right.
And I remember we just opened up the page and we were like, what? No, this ain't happening. When's it going on sale? You know, and go up to Ticket fucking Master the next day. It's like, when's it going to the sale? It's like, oh, next week. Oh, I'm going to be here fucking an hour before to watch this. You know, I'm getting tickets. And a friend of mine was like, oh, Celtic, you know, he just, before this interview happened, I put out, you know, who wants to ask questions. And before this is over, I actually have a whole list of questions that people have asked me. But they were like, I thought Celtic Frost was listed, you know, as an opening band.
There might have been a point where we tried to get them, but it was unavailable. I mean, I was in charge of getting the metal bands on. Lilker, get a fucking metal band. Get one of them crazy fucking evil metal bands. I'm like, all right, let me see what I can do. I ended up calling Dave Vincent, and that's how we got Morbid. But I was like, okay, this was when Brutal Truth was first starting too.
Yeah.
So I had fucking friends in that scene. And they were like, fuck yeah, we'll play with SOD. We'll fucking drive up in our bus from Florida. And that's what they did. Yeah, they fucking drove up 95 and fucking...
I mean, that was probably, like I said, that's in my top 10 shows to this day. Because it was just such a violent fucking disgusting, like, from my end, and we were, like, literally on the dance floor, fucking me and a couple of my friends of mine just trying to survive. You know, just trying not to get knocked the fuck out, you know.
I almost regret that. I want people to just have a good time and enjoy the show.
I mean, we enjoyed the show, but it was definitely, from my end, it was definitely a fight to survive. You know, it was brutal. It was the best fucking thing I had ever seen in my fucking life, and it was like, you know, just the sounds coming back at us at the PA was like, this is thick as fucking shit, man. This is not a fucking joke. You know, it was just, it was incredible, you know.
Well, cool. I'm glad to.
No, you know, it's, you know, I'm almost fanboying out at this point where it's like it was one of those things where I was like, this is fucking nuts, you know. I can't fucking believe I'm actually witnessing this. You know, I never thought you guys would actually play again. You know, I had always
I was always touch and go with that.
Yeah, well, you know, and I know that you had mentioned in the past that, you know, you would do another one, you know, if it's up to the guys.
It was never my decision.
No, well, you know, it really comes down to if two guys and one guy can get together.
Yeah, it was always some just melodrama and politics, to be honest, and I always stayed out of that. You know?
Well, you my thing is, and I, you know, from everybody I've ever known that has hung out with you or have known you, and they're like, it's like, yo, you know, Danny just smoked weed in my van. You know, like, well, that's what Danny does. You know, and like, you know, no offense, but, you know, it's like, you've always been that accessible guy who just hangs out, chills, do what the fuck he wants.
Why would I get offended by that?
You know, why would you? You know, it's, you know, you say it how it is, and it is what it is. If you don't like it, fuck you. You know.
Well, yeah, because I never tried to prove anything because I just don't care.
Well, yeah, there was never any ego with you. You
Well,
know,
yeah.
like I said, the first time I met you was at, oh, he's gonna love this, Kevin Gill. Kevin Gill.
Kevin Gill.
Kevin Gill. He
There he is.
first time I met him was first time I met you was at one of his Kevin Gill used to have these monumental barbecues, and it would be beers, weed, and music, and you would just show up to Kevin Gill's house, before he went vegetarian, and he would cook up a whole bunch of fucking meat. You would eat, drink, smoke, and maybe get some sort of trouble, and you would go home. And it was a lot of fucking fun, and, you were always extremely fucking humble, during those fucking, during that time. It was like, holy shit, Danny's here, and you're like, hey, what's up?
Yeah, because I don't give a shit.
No, you don't, you definitely don't. All right, so I put out a couple days ago that I was going to be talking to you, and a friend of mine, Rich O'Brien, who plays in this band Darkside NYC, actually incredible band, he came up with a list of fucking questions.
Okay.
So we're gonna just tackle them however you'd like. So I always noticed that he showed up to shows carrying his own equipment. Why?
I didn't have anybody else to do it for me. I mean, maybe people thought that us guys in metal bands were like fucking rolling in it and had a whole big road crew, but first of all, it would have looked dumb if I would have rolled up to CBGB's and had a bunch of dudes setting my shit up. Would have looked stupid. Like, oh, who's this fucking famous metal dude with his crew? But no, it was just, I wouldn't expect anybody to carry my shit in. If you want to go on stage, you got to bring your shit in and set it up. Yeah, I mean, maybe people thought I was like fucking that famous or whatever that I didn't have to do that, but that wouldn't be realistic. Plus, I didn't care. I wasn't above it. I just, like I said, you want to play the show, you got to plug your shit in. Who's going to do it for me?
You'll do it.
Yeah. And that's it.
All right. Next question that he came up with: any truth to his actual resemblance to the patient on Anthrax's STD LP?
No. I don't think they were trying to make it look like that was me. I always thought it looked like more like Frank. Oh, actually. Never heard that one.
All right. Well, there you go, Richie. You got the truth.
It's a brutal truth.
What does he think of his old bandmates playing with the Big Four, and who should be included in the Big Four in his opinion?
What, you mean another Big Four? I mean, who should be...
Well, here's the thing. I've had this conversation with other people in the Slayer camp, so to speak, who have referred to it as the Big One and the Small Three.
I always saw that interview with Warren.
Yes, and because to be really honest with you, Metallica could headline anything at any time and pack it in, where the other three could play 3, 4, 5,000 places and pack those in, but they'll never pack in a fucking Yankee Stadium on their own.
Right.
What's your opinion on that? Do you think like an Exodus or a Testament could be included in that Big Four?
The funny thing is that I remember whether it was Raw or Metal Forces or Kerrang or one of those British magazines back in those days, they said instead of the Big Four, you should roll in Nuclear Assault, Exodus, and Testament, and then you would have the Magnificent Seven. So, to me, that whole thing was the Big Four. I never felt excluded that I wasn't in it. I think it was just, it started off as a show and a tour, and it became more of some classification thing, like the Big Four thrash metal bands. But yeah, it was even uneven with that, because Metallica definitely went on to bigger, and some might say better things. But that falls under the same heading as like trying to classify stuff. Like back then there was thrash metal and then speed metal. I'm like, I didn't see any fucking difference, and people will try to tell you the difference. But I never thought about certain bands being in some bigger group, some umbrella, and then other bands not being in it. I think that was just the name of a show or a tour they did, and then it took on a life of its own. And well, out of those four bands, right? I mean, I think Slayer has stuck to their guns.
Yes.
And, you know, there are other bands that were more important for me back then. You know, I think Exodus was a great band. I really liked their first album the most. But I never saw a point to having some bands as some part of exclusive group and other bands not being in it. And that was not out of envy. It just didn't make sense to me. You know, I mean, what would have been the big four of hardcore? And then who do you choose and who do you not choose? So, I mean, I don't know. To me, it was just some kind of promotional bullshit.
Jason left Metallica to play with Voivod, parentheses, eventually to stick to his roots, close parentheses. Does he, meaning you, does he see/feel any parallels to this?
Well, I didn't leave Metallica. I didn't leave Anthrax. I was asked to leave. If that's the parallel that he's hinting at. But I have always done what I've wanted to do without worrying about what people think. So I suppose there would be a parallel that way. When I left Nuclear Assault in '92 to do Brutal Truth, some people would have thought that was a shitty career move. You're going to go play noisy grindcore when you've been playing thrash metal. But for me, it was what I wanted to do, and thrash metal wasn't interesting me anymore, and I followed my heart. I've been accused by cynical people on message boards in the 90s of being a trend jumper because I stopped playing thrash metal because it wasn't popular anymore and wanted to play grindcore. And then, but anybody who would say that really doesn't understand me or why I do what I do. And whatever. It's, hate is gonna hate, right?
Yeah.
But, okay, I could see a vague parallel to that. Although that was more like his career decision, but that is something where he did what he wanted to do despite what he could have done. But then again, there's no bass on Injustice for All, so he's probably just had a chip on his shoulder from the beginning, which I wouldn't blame him for. You know, no bass equals no life.
Any fond memories of driving for two cabs? Does he recall the drunken metalheads who would wait for him rather than any old cabbie?
I didn't drive for Fort Twos. Those are the crackheads from Whitestone. I drove for fucking Aldborough, and then it changed to Century. Century is 100 years, not Century like a guard. And I was flattered when there'd be metalheads waiting around because they knew I would be listening to Burzum and Darkthrone when I didn't have classical music on. And those were some fun times, and yeah, there was, whatchamacallit, just like that chick on the TV, there was some drugs done in those cars. And, yeah, I worked Friday and Saturday night, and when nobody was in the car and I was just sitting at the Bayside rail station, I smoked a little weed and listened to some black metal, and people would get in the car and recognize me. The best story about that was a dude who got in the car, recognized me vaguely, and said, "Hey man, weren't you the guy who played in Nuclear Assault?" I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "What are you doing now?" And I played in Hemlock, so I said, "I play in a black metal band." And he goes, "Oh, are you the only white member?" And I kind of deadpanned it. I didn't laugh in his face. I just said, no, dude, it's black means occult. It's not skin color. But no, I do have fond memories of that.
I remember when someone told me that you were driving a cab, and this is before you knew what the deal was. Like what guys were guys would come home with from tour and like they're still trying to survive, and they still need a job after tour and shit like that. And I was just like, and so I was like, yeah, Dan's driving a fucking cab. And I'm like, what? And then until you go on tour yourself and you realize, well, I'm really not making as much money as I thought I was going to be making.
I lived with my parents too then, so I mean, I wasn't paying rent, but
You still need money.
I still needed money. I still needed something to do, and that was easy.
That's fucking fantastic. Let's see what else. We talked about this off camera, but he asked us. Billy Milano always insulted the other members of SOD, especially Scott. But I remember him never bothering you.
Well, he wouldn't bother me because there was, I don't know, I wasn't as provocative. And if you know me, then I don't piss a lot of people off. I'm not very controversial. Also, I wasn't an Anthrax. That had something to do with it. The reason that SOD had to stop doing stuff near the end of the last century was because there was some confusion and some people thought that SOD was going to do more stuff. And I don't know how much I want to talk about, but the point being that I never gave him a reason to piss me off. Other people did.
Fair enough. Okay. Asking about two bands hardly anyone brings up anymore. The Crab Society pre-SOD and Hemlock 2000-ish filthy black metal.
The Crab Society was originally just me and Craig Satari doing what was eventually called noisecore later.
Yeah.
We predated Anal Cunt and all these bands to have the 5-second noisy blasts with total shitty production. And we took stuff that we were listening to, like Siege from Boston, Larum from the Netherlands, and other bands that were playing fast, noisy stuff, and we just condensed it and made it shorter. And some of those bands had 2-second songs. And we said, let's just do a whole fucking record of 2-second songs. Let's just cut to the fucking chase here and make some fucking noise. And the demo we did was called Noise for Noise's Sake. And we recorded it under adverse conditions. Just saying that we were kind of drunk and high, and the recording techniques were very primitive and what you would call necro these days in the metal scene. And it was just for fun, and it took on a life of its own, and it was just being stupid and making as much fast noise as you could, just for fun. Hemlock, playing black metal in New York in the 90s was a fucking waste of time.
Really?
Well, no. But we were, I'm not going to say we were hated, although Lena would probably love me to say that. But we were into the European black metal. We were doing it in New York where nobody else was doing it. In the 90s, it was all guttural death metal, and we wanted to do something that was more after our hearts and our souls, our dark souls. And we, it was some dudes from Ceremonium, which was a great fucking doom metal band, were part of the band. And whatchamacallit, Tony, our drummer, who had been in, what was his band called back then? Porphyria. Porphyria, I'm talking old school, yeah. We were just doing something to be adversarial because we wanted to play black metal and nobody gave a fuck about it in New York City. There weren't any woods or any fucking stuff like that, and we weren't going to try to pretend that we were anything like that. We played urban black metal. But it was more about fucking, not so much about Satan, just more about fucking, okay, the word Satan comes from Hebrew, it's pronounced Satan, and it means adversary. We were an adversarial black metal band, we were against everything that was around then, and we just, I don't know, we almost wanted people to hate us. you know, and we did what we did, and we didn't give a fuck, which is my basic philosophy in life anyway. And we broke up after 9/11 because our drummer wanted to go to fucking Afghanistan and kill Osama bin Laden, and that was that. Our last show was with Pro Fanatica and Black Witchery in New Jersey, which was fucking epic. And I didn't play black metal again for like 10 years until up in Rochester I formed Nocturnal Hellstorm in 2010 and carried on with that spirit, which is basically anti-Christian, just very, very aggressive atheism, which we didn't care if people thought we were satanic, if it fucking scared them, really. And I am like that to this day.
So it basically comes down to not giving a fuck.
Yeah, well, that's my whole thing. I've never given a fuck.
Why should you?
Yeah, I never will, and that's why I do what I do.
Okay, here's another one. You're gonna love this one.
All right.
How different would the metal landscape be today if Neil Turbin would have just sucked it up and wore platform heels?
Oh, okay, this is referring to the fact that one of the reasons I was thrown into Anthrax supposedly was because Neil Turbin didn't like the fact that I was taller than him.
I've heard this.
He also wanted me to stand in the back like the bass player from Judas Priest.
Ian Hill, yeah.
And I said, no, I'm going to stand in the front like Steve Harris. Fuck off. If Neil Turbin had worn platform heels, it would not have changed his personality. It just would have made him taller. Okay? It would have been a fucking cosmetic change that would have not have altered his personality, and nothing would have. And it's a funny question, and we'll give it up to Rich for his sense of humor there. But
he has quite a twisted sense of humor, if you know Rich.
And I do appreciate that. And I don't think I should have stayed in Anthrax. I think everything happens for a reason, and when I was thrown out of Anthrax, it was 3 days before A Fistful of Metal came out. It was a bummer. I shed a couple of tears, I'll be honest, because I was going to be on my first record and I was so excited. And then 3 days before it came out, I wasn't in the bands anymore. And then I said, I'm not going to sit around and feel sorry for myself. And I called up John Connolly, and the rest is history.
He had some other questions, but I think Rich has gotten most of his fucking questions out of the way. What I want to talk to you about is this.
Ah, that, yes.
Yes.
I could do that face if you want.
There you go.
Yeah.
This was a fun read. I mean, I'm not going to lie. I picked this up because I was like, oh shit, Dan has a fucking book about it. What I want to know is, did you or who wrote this again?
Dave Hofer.
Did Dave actually have to call people and confirm stuff or clear stuff? Or was it you?
Nah, Dave did all the legwork. Dave reached out to everybody from my mom to Fenris from Darkthrone, and he didn't really confirm anything. He just reached out to people to get corroborating, like, their side of it. If I mentioned a certain story, he would go, this would be a lot more colorful if I talked to the other dude he was talking about. And he did a lot of work on this. He came out to Rochester a few times from Chicago, and there's a little gazebo in front of our apartment complex, and we would sit out there, and depending on what time of day it was either coffee and weed or then beer and weed or whatever. And lots of cigarettes, unfortunately, which I'm about to have. And he interviewed me and prodded my memory. It was also... You guys are too nice. Whatchamacallit? The thing is, the reason this book came about is because Dave was doing the merch for Brutal Truth. So around 2007, 2008 at the latest, probably 2007, we were in Spain. We had a day off. We were driving from fucking Barcelona all the way down to Sevilla at the bottom of the country. It's fucking like 900 clicks. Just in the van. I had a fucking bunch of weed. I think we stopped and bought bottles of red wine because they were like €2 from the local fucking vineyard.
Oh, God.
And I was telling stories. And somebody said, amongst a bunch of laughter, dude, you should write a book. And I said, I would never remember all that stuff. Dave just fucking stuck his finger in the air like old Ray Capo and said, I'll fucking write it. And that's where the idea took root. And then basically he had been a journalist. He had written, what was it, Punk Planet? I forgot. I'm looking at my lovely wife who was off camera. And the way things happened was that he came out to Rochester and just fucking picked my brain. And I had so many flyers, posters, tour books, laminates, all these things jogged my memory. When you have a tour book from 1991 that has every date you're fucking playing, when all the bands are going on, where you're going the next day, then it all starts coming back to you.
Oh, yeah.
So, between his questions and all these little things to help prod my memory, we dredged it all out of my brain. And then the stories. There's a story in there about how when Nuclear Assault and Dark Angel were on tour, there was we were in Newcastle, and some of the dudes on Dark Angel's bus, they had this chick, and she was drunk, and she was fucking naked, and some people were taking advantage of her. And I walked on their bus like, what's up, guys? What's going on? Just out of curiosity, like, oh, somebody want to burn or something? And I saw this poor drunk chick, and I saw that she was being kind of manhandled and somewhat abused, and I looked at Gene and said, that's not cool, man. So I said, and that had a profound effect on him.
Mm.
And some people told me that that's one of the best things they saw in that book, how I just looked at this situation and said, that's not right. And I'm not talking shit about any guys in the band, because dudes get drunk too.
Yeah.
And they see fucking some chick who wants to put out and blah, 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 and take her fucking clothes off. That's rock and roll. But at this particular thing, it was awkward. And I remember telling Gene, like, this is not why I play music, or whatever, or something like that. And some people thought that was cool.
Mm. Yeah, like I said, this definitely had some fun stories, some eye-opening stories, definitely. We've all been there. Anyone who goes on the road, you definitely, you get stories. There's always somebody willing to, I don't want to fucking say it because my wife's behind the camera right now and your wife's right there. But,
Look,
shit happens.
Shit happens.
Shit happens.
Look, I was a single man back then, and, but, there's things I would not do. I would not take advantage of vulnerable, impressionable people.
You're getting back together again with the Nuke guys. What's the story with that?
Well, it's what you would call the current lineup. It's only me and John from the old days, the old days. We've had Eric Burke on guitar since the turn of the century. And we don't have Glenn in the band right now. Glenn had some issues with his forearm a while back, and it's still giving him trouble. So we have Nick Barker from Cradle of Filth, Dimmu Borgir, Brujeria, fucking 10 million other bands. An old fucking friend of mine. We're going to be doing this carefully because I don't want to do that Ozzy thing where you keep playing and fucking milking shit. Having said that, people come up and are like, fucking Nuclear Assault was such an iconic band, and I love hearing those old songs. So we're doing some more shows, but what we're trying to do now is ramp it down. So we've been doing this thing for a few years now called the Final Assault. It seems to go on forever. The point being that if we play a certain territory in the recent past. We're not going to go back there again. But we have a show in Los Angeles. I'm not sure when this is going to be aired, but we are playing Los Angeles, or have played, if this aired after that, on January 6th, because we haven't played LA for ages. We also have a show at St. Vitus in Brooklyn, January 20th. That is a special thing. That is actually a benefit show. That is our bro Howie's 50th birthday, and another old friend of ours, Pete, which is one of Howie's friends and one of my old friends. It's a benefit for his animal rescue farm. And that's more like a special occasion thing. You know, they're covering the expenses because I live in the frozen north now.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah. So we're going to come down and do that show because Howie, like we spoke about before, you know, is a real old friend of mine and one of the biggest supporters of nuclear assault back in the day. Literally drove us to play shows and
Dubbed your demos.
and fucking featured us in his occasional irregularity fanzine.
Yes.
But it's not going to be one of those things. We're not going to be recording more music. We did the Pounder EP a few years ago, and that was basically 4 songs, 3 of which I wrote, where I had to put myself in a time machine to write them. I had to write thrash metal from the 80s. And I was like, I had to put a speed limit on things because I've played grindcore and black metal, so I'm like, not too fast, not too grim, just fucking make it, you know. And I did. I didn't go back and listen to Bonded by Blood or anything like that. I just fucking said, I'm going to pretend I'm 22 again and write some music. And I think I got away with it.
Well, Dan, it's been a pleasure. It really has been. I thank you. I thank your wife
very
Heather
welcome.
for this. It's been amazing. I thank you.
You are very welcome, and thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and fuck you.